I'm sure you've heard of the Kama Sutra. Somewhere between condom ads, sex positions, porn sites, and eroticas. Today let's talk about the two men who jointly gave birth to the phrase Kama Sutra and all that it stands for. One of them was an Indian philosopher called Vatsayana, who compiled the text in the 3rd century in ancient India. Even though not much is known about him, apart from the fact that he helped birth the Kama Sutra, the treatise of desire, he still holds a significant part of the narrative, just because of this very contribution. The second father of Kama Sutra is Francis Richard Burton, fondly known as avid Orientalist and connoisseur of all things sexy. He helped publish the first translation of Kama Sutra from Sanskrit to English. He brought this book with him to Europe in the year 1883 in order to help empower the sexually repressed men and women living under nosy Victorian values. The fact that he was vividly documenting his rather sexual travels of sleeping with women from all over the world, ranging from the Middle East to Southeast Asia, his publishing the Kama Sutra didn't really add to his already notoriously sex-crazy image. But of course, he had admirers, like Sir Frederick Leighton, who painted him on the 26th of April 1872. And the picture that he painted him and Leighton wasn't even known for painting portraits, but he did so all in admiration for the guy who had literally sailed most of the 7 seas and knew about 29 languages, from Hindi, French, German to, honestly, I can't even remember. So this painting that I'm looking at of him reveals the almost surreal man he appeared to be, with the light highlighting the contours of his face and showing the battle scars he had obtained on his travels, that the men around him, squeamish yet curious. But let's get back to his infamous child, the Kama Sutra. It's quite contested whether it should be regarded as something he heavily contributed towards creating, or if he just snatched it out of the hands of Vatsayana, who originally wrote the text and appropriated it to become the saliva-inducing romance that it has become today. To understand this, let's look at what the book says and what 3 academics believe it says in relation to Burton. The first is Wendy Doniger, who shows us the problematic nature of Burton's translation, what it tells us and what it misses. She first explains that the intention behind Burton translating this text, at least in part, was because he was looking east, as Edward Said would say, to gain wisdom from the Oriental celebration of sexuality. And while the book does do that through its aptly titled chapters on kissing, on pressing, scratching, or marking with nails of the various modes of striking and the sounds appropriate to them, Wendy believes the gloriousness of the text is revealed when it is looked at in relation to its context. Because by promoting the idea of sex as science and art that transcends its role from birth-giving to tell a rather progressive history of the 3rd century. But that's not it, because another academic highly invested in the history of desire in India, Professor Madhvi Menon, tells us that really the text is only progressive when compared to the heavy policing of sexuality seen in India today. And I can attest to that. Being an Indian myself, I remember trying to read the Kama Sutra on the metro in Delhi and having to cover the book in the newspaper after experiencing extremely big eyes glaring at me from a kind of confusion and excitement I didn't know if I wanted to understand. But Menon goes on to tell us that really even that understanding of the text is rather reductionist, and that through her research she's found that in Khajuraho temples built in the 15th century, that are still present in India today, there are quite pornographic sculptures that Menon thinks will make even Madonna blush. And that shows us just maybe it wasn't all that exciting and progressive to be reading the Kama Sutra in the 3rd century. One might then ask, but wait, where does Burton fit into this narrative? And that is a valid question, but I argue that every time we talk about and of the Kama Sutra, the fact that there is a the in front of it, we are in part still looking at it from the Oriental lens he looked at it from. In saying the Kama Sutra, we are saying and repeating the othering of this idea of sexuality in the East that Burton contrasted with that of the West. And that really makes us ask the question also, where does the idea of something being progressive comes from? Isn't it always in contrast with some ideas from the West that have now become normalized and generalized to appear progressive? And that is exactly what Ben Grant does in his paper on the English translation of the Kama Sutra, and he calls it the dual location of the text, wherein Kama Sutra exists both in the East and the West at the same time. For him, this is what helps construct and deconstruct the history of Kama Sutra as a cross-cultural, cross-generational idea. He points out how the fact that Burton did not completely translate the title, that it is called the Kama Sutra, suggests that it is posing itself as being untranslated, while embodying the exotic East that Burton wanted it to represent. A quick Google of the phrase will take you to a porn site where you'll find various porn videos of a white man and white women doing it among burning incense sticks and silk-draped canopy-like bed. This is evident of the apparent luxurious connotation of Kama Sutra. I mean, it doesn't imply a quick one-night stand. It is almost ritualistic in that manner, as it is branded with the arguably luxurious idea of sex for pleasure, but also for the showcase of power and role-playing. Just the way Vatsayana talked about it in the book. He details chapters and chapters on learning how to pleasure the woman, something that made 18th century Burton squeal with joy as he looked back at his brothers and sisters in Europe, rushing to finish so they could get back to business or so they could run back to their mistresses. Because he could see this contrast. He could see that, like Europeans at the time, as Grant points out, did not believe that pleasure and desire were practices for the bedroom, and wanted to show that it could be by bringing the text home with him. I therefore argue that when we talk about Kama Sutra, we are talking about two men documenting the history of desire and sexuality from different parts of the world, and the translation, in part, is a conversation between the two men, one from the East and one from the West.